Here's an article from September of 1860, and it's right before Lincoln became president, and it's talking about Stephen Douglas. So I thought this was pretty interesting because apparently, even if Douglas had won and not Lincoln, which I mean, Lincoln didn't actually win the election, but if Douglas had been put in there as well, I think the Civil War still would have happened according to this article. So and I'm just reading bits and pieces, actually, I think of a couple of different articles. So it says, question, if they, the Southern states, secede from the Union upon the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln, before he commits an overt act against their constitutional rights, will you advise or vindicate resistance by force to their secession? And Mr. Douglas said, I answer emphatically that it is the duty of the President of the U.S. and others in authority under him to enforce the laws of the United States. But he's not saying of the Constitution, which allowed secession. Laws of the United States as passed by Congress, right? So he's not saying the Constitution, passed by Congress in the course expounded by them. So he's completely ignoring the Constitution, which is what the Southerners said were used to justify their secession. They had the right to separate. And I, as in duty bound by my oath of fidelity to the Constitution, would do all my power to aid the government of the United States in maintaining the supremacy of the laws against all resistance to them, come from what quarter it might. So he's just saying use the Constitution against secession, even though the Constitution allows the states to leave, or it did anyway. In other words, I think the president of the U.S., whoever he may be, should treat all attempts to break up the Union by resistance to its laws as Old Hickory treated the nullifiers in 1832. So yeah, that was Stephen Douglas. So Stephen Douglas would have went to war as well. So the Vicksburg Citizen, the Douglas organ in this state, had an article the other day headed, or I guess titled, right? Quote, a road to the north, unquote, taking the ground that the election of Lincoln would result in disunion. And this Douglas organist said he would stand side by side with those brave and gallant spirits to the last ditch. So um, now, on the right, it says, in this address, Mr. Douglas declares that if the Southern states and a part, it says not a part, but all, shall secede from the Union upon the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln, it will be the duty of the President of the U.S., who, in the case supposed, will be Lincoln, by arms to punish or subdue them, right, the Southern states, and that he will counsel him to do so and aid him to do so by all the means in his power. So Stephen Douglas was an asshole as well. I thought he was maybe better than Lincoln, but apparently Douglas was either an absolute freaking retard as well, or he was actually part of the conspiracy, just like Lincoln was. So, um, so then it says up on top, Mr. Lincoln, this declaration of Mr. Douglas is in effect that the election of a man to the presidency of the United States by the votes alone of one section, right? Only one section of the country is not legit, who is pledged to use all powers of the government for the destruction of the rights and property of the other section would not justify the weaker in resistance, but that if in such an event the 15 southern states should assume to determine on the extent of their danger and to quietly withdraw from it, he should regard their action as revolt, and as such to be punished with all the force of the government. That then this we can conceive of no doctrine more dangerous to the South. It confounds resistance to the established law by individuals, which it would be the duty of the chief magistrate to punish, with the peaceable secession of states from a compact no longer consistent, right? The Constitution, with the interest or existence of its constituents. But it treats the Union as a perpetual bond, right? Which it was not, exacting unconditional submission for forever from a weaker to a stronger section. It strips the states of the chief attribute of sovereignty, to wit, the right to determine when their existence is put to hazard, as to the means necessary to their preservation, and affirms that while it is legitimate in the people of the North having control of the general government through it to inflict upon the states of the South whatever wrongs it may be consistent with their interest or feelings to impose, it would be treason in the people of the South to obey the orders of their states in opposition to federal authority. Then it says on the right, fraught with error, as this doctrine is, subversive, and I think, yeah, subversive of that constitutional theory in which alone the rights of the states are to be found, it has at this moment and under the circumstances a bloody significance. The enemies of the South in the northern states have selected Abraham Lincoln to lead them in the irrepressible conflict, I guess inevitable conflict, which he has proclaimed, right? Lincoln has proclaimed. Mr. Seward, the most distinguished counselor of Mr. Lincoln, declares at Boston that the election of Lincoln is sure. But how would he know that if half the states weren't going to elect Lincoln? That with it the power of slavery will end, and that the irrepressible conflict will be pressed to its infamous and bloody close. So, right, so they were already planning war. This is September of 1860. So, and Seward was an evil individual and part of the conspiracy as well, obviously. So, um, and then on the bottom right there, it says regarding Douglas, it says by a man from the north, so it's talking about Douglas, and so he was a man from the north, from the neighborhood of Lincoln himself. So Stephen Douglas lived in the same neighborhood as Lincoln. That's crazy. A candidate for the presidency, volunteering his counsel to Lincoln, and in the event of his election, his aid to wage war upon our people and to slay them in battle as rebels or hang them in cold blood as traitors, if they shall render obedience to state rather than federal authority, is repugnant to every sense of right and merits from the people of the South, the severest rebuke. So, yeah, so Stephen Douglas was obviously retarded, evil, just like Lincoln, and yeah, obviously the war was pre-planned, right? Seward, Lincoln, all the abolitionists. I mean, that's what they had been working towards for years. The abolitionist movement for literally decades. So, um, yeah, all part of the conspiracy, right? So I think that's all I have. Yep.